So Mark Dreyer represented Judith Regan. Judith Regan apparently didn't pay Mark Dreyer, and he wound up suing Judith Regan for the legal fees for the lawsuit against News Corp. In any event, Mark Dreyer allegedly concocted a scheme to sell promissory notes from a real estate developer during the financial crisis. He said, "Hey, I've got this paper. I can sell it for 50 cents on the dollar." And he went to some hedge funds and sold this paper that wasn't worth allegedly anything.
The paper was printed on.
Who is that stud?
Oh, that's me.
You look so tan.
I've got the package ready.
Well, I am tan.
But you look really tan up there.
I do.
It looks good.
Well, he went to sell it to the Toronto Pension Fund.
He sold it to... Wow, that's kind of scary.
Easier to convince up there.
Or so one would think.
But just, it's not as easy to explain it in a minute 40 news package. But, I mean, basically that's what he allegedly did was sold it to 3 different hedge funds. One hedge fund he sold for $13.5 million, another for $100 million, and then he was working on a third deal when he was arrested. And we only had 2 pictures of the guy. That was the biggest challenge. How do we tell the story with 2 still photos? We didn't have any video of it.
And one of them was with Mike Strahan?
One was he hosted a golf tournament with Michael Strahan back in June.
Poor Strahan.
Yeah.
If you want to listen to the package, I have it.
Oh, all right, let's watch.
Mark Dreyer is a big-time New York lawyer now facing big-time legal troubles of his own. Dreyer is the managing partner of Dreyer LLP, with 250 lawyers on staff and several offices around the country, including one here on Park Avenue in Manhattan. He hosted a golf tournament this summer with former football giant Michael Strahan, reportedly has a $50,000 a month New York apartment, a house in the Hamptons, and high-profile clients, including book publisher Judith Regan, handling her $100 million lawsuit against News Corp, the parent company of Fox News. Dreyer was arrested at LaGuardia Airport after a flight back from Canada for allegedly masterminding a $100 million fraud against various hedge funds. According to the 2-count indictment from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Dreyer concocted a scheme to take advantage of the current financial crisis, selling phony promissory notes from a real estate development company at what he claimed was a steep discount. The feds say Dreyer promised buyers they were paying 50 cents on the dollar, collecting $13.5 million from one hedge fund, roughly $100 million from another, and was busy negotiating a third deal for tens of millions more when he was busted.
Why someone would do this is unfathomable.
Mark Alonzo is a securities attorney in New York.
The documents we prepare and the advice we give should be unimpeachable. There never should be a moment that the client doesn't think that we're operating in their best interest.
The single counts of securities and wire fraud carry possible sentences of up to 20 years in prison and $5 million in fines. Dreyer's attorney says it's too soon to comment on the case, and he wouldn't say how his client would plead or whether a deal with prosecutors is in the works. In New York, Rick Leventhal, Fox News.
Well, that was what I did yesterday afternoon, and it aired this morning.
Not a lot of due diligence happening from the buyer side on those deals, I would imagine.
How is that possible?
He allegedly created all sorts of supporting documents, including documents from an accountant who analyzed the deal. And he provided, and my friend who I interviewed, the attorney Mark Alonzo, was saying, if you can come up with enough paper, you walk in with a stack of papers, here's the deal, and these people trust you to begin with. Here's the deal, it's a great deal, I got all the documentation, all the supporting stuff you need, then people will apparently buy it for as much as $100 million. Especially if they think they're going to cash in.
Big time.
Yeah. But you know what they say, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And in this case, my friend is friends with a guy who works in Dreyer's firm. He's got 250 lawyers, and the lawyers are now getting lawyers. Because what do they do now? Their boss was just busted. How did they get paid? What are they going to be implicated in some way? And I asked him, he must have had help if he had all this paperwork and he created this huge scheme. And he said, no, not necessarily. You do it on your computer. You have word processor, bam, 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 bam. If that's his business, securities business, he can just take the paperwork and just change some names. But what's the
But
motivation?
usually in due diligence, somebody actually picks up a phone and phones somebody who's on the other end
Right.
of that document.
Especially with that kind of money involved.
Well,
But how do
$100
you?
million bucks? Wow.
I mean, if you're talking about arrogance, and we were talking about arrogance of the governor, and the alleged arrogance of this guy, how do you think you're going to get away with a fraudulent scheme like this with that kind of money involved?
Maybe you've done it with smaller amounts.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be my first thing would be, I mean, I'll bet if you went back on Blagojevich, you might find that there's some other things that led up to this. I don't think it just pops out in,
You read a
in
laundry
one
list.
shot there.
Yeah, he apparently has had a series of events during his time as governor.
Scumbag.
Andrea rocks. So do you, Rick. Thanks, April.
Oh, thanks, April.
All the fans out there. Faust just told me that my package was in the TriCaster. Virtual stock trading is an excellent learning tool, John Harris writes.
He's right.
He has a virtual portfolio on MarketWatch's virtual stock market, and it's taught me never to buy stocks. I seem to have a knack of doing exactly the wrong thing at the wrong time. If I buy, the stock goes down. If I sell, it goes up. I can't tell you how many people have told me that a year ago they started shorting stocks, or they moved all their money out of stocks into bonds.
There were a lot, and there were a lot who didn't,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
there's a story
Right.
today in the Journal about the head of Legg Mason Value Trust, who seemed to have, he was an incredibly successful portfolio manager for more than a decade, made all the wrong bets this time.
Is that right?
All the wrong bets.
I remember-
the Journal?
Countrywide.
I remember reading Dennis Gartman maybe 9 months ago, 10 months ago. And he's a newsletter, and he's actually a brilliant commodities guy. But he had one thing in there, and that was listing all of the different bear markets, recession, depression from the 1920s. And I remember when we were down 10 and 15 and then ultimately 20% and 22%, everybody said, okay, well, that's where the bottom's going to be,
Yeah.
et cetera. And he said, folks, do not delude yourselves that a bear market and a crash can take 50% off. And I remember sitting there going, yeah, but 50% off. That was back then, not now.
Right, right,
And I actually sat there and stayed in until it was like, 35% was gone or something like that, until I threw my arms up and just
Can we see the big board, Kevin?
it's probably rallying today.
Yeah, the futures were up a couple hundred points, I think.
So
What's that? 250.
50.
Oh, 50. It's up 50. The market's up 50 points. What do you tell people today about the market and what they should be doing with their money?
We don't tell anybody. We don't advise people what to do with money. All we advise people to do is get educated, and that you have a nest egg of money. You have to allocate your nest egg. Part of that nest egg should be allocated into bonds and equities and whatnot. And so you better learn what to do with it. And
So
you
go to
better
a site like yours to learn
Absolutely.
more about the market.
Absolutely.
But you're not telling anybody what to do with their
No,
money.
sir.
For one of the emailers just asked about a guest yesterday. You want to look for his book, and you thought his name was J.T. Wood. It's T.J. Walker. He wasn't my guest, but he's been a frequent guest on the show. And his name is T.J. Walker. Something about presentation, giving the perfect presentation, something like that. You know T.J., don't you? No?
CEO of Media Training Worldwide.
Oh, he's CEO of Media Training Worldwide. He's partners with Robert. Oh, no, that's different. He partners with Jess Todfeld.